so much else you're going to share with us now. So thank you very much for coming in from
Thanks
West
to
Africa.
you.
Yeah.
So it's all about movies. We were in a place yesterday evening where they shot a movie, and there was another movie. When I met Cara on the flight from Paris to here, everybody in the airplane stopped speaking, and everybody thought, look, the Beauty and the Beast. And then it was nice, because when we left the airplane, we landed here in Milano, everybody was telling me, goodbye, Beast, and it was very nice of them. People have a strange way to flatter you. So I work for the UN. I created the thing which is called the Ethical Fashion Initiative years ago. And I'll tell you why we created that with the UN. You know, we've been talking today about the fact that the environment around us is collapsing. And it's not only the environment that is collapsing, it's society as a whole. Society is a structure of trust, of confidence, of relationship, of collaboration, is collapsing in many places. There are many places, especially in the global south, or in places where there is war, where there is conflict, where social capital has completely disappeared. We happen to work in these places as the UN. This is the original mandate of the UN. Peace is about social capital. When social capital collapses, peace disappears. In the Sahel, which is a wide range of countries that goes from Western to Eastern Africa, social capital is collapsing. Islamo-mafias, terrorist groups, criminals, ordinary criminals, bandits, are completely destroying what we call the fabric of society. And this is creating a situation in which a mountain of people have to look for another place to live. 40% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa is under the age of 20. It's a mountain of people with scars or no future. 50% of the population growth from now to 2030 will come from Africa. Because fertility rates have decreased all over the world, they have not decreased in Africa. In Afghanistan, where I work, where I often go, and in Syria, and in these countries, forces that I call the darkest forts, the darkest sides of humanity, are trying to destroy civilization. The struggle today is the struggle for the environment, but there's another struggle, which is the one in between humanity and the darkest forces of the humankind. It's in between civilization as we know it and the medieval age. I have a friend in Afghanistan who is a fashion designer, and a very good one, who is of my age. So she lived in Afghanistan in the 70s, when Afghanistan was a normal country. And she told me, you know, Simone, you cannot take for granted what you have. The possibility to go out dressed as you want, as a woman, the possibility to have relationship, the possibility to study, to have work, everything, because we had it. I had it, and we lost it one day, and we lost it forever. So what we have in this cannot be taken for granted. How is this related with fashion? It's related with fashion because the fashion industry, the fashion value chain, is very suitable for low-income countries. It's the entry point in manufacturing for every country. The wealth of the villa where we were yesterday was created out of the fashion industry. The wealth of Milano was created by the textile mills and the first fashion here in Europe, along with France and England. The fashion industry is suitable to work in these countries, in the countries where the social capital is collapsing, because it's easy to set up production, to set up this kind of business. And many businesses related to fashion are in there, also because many raw materials come from there. Western Africa, where I work and where we have problems with terrorism, with the war in Mali, in Burkina, it's cotton place. Very good cotton, huge producers of cotton. And Afghanistan produces cashmere, people don't know it, but my friends at Loro Piana, not far from here, they have their headquarters, they spin also the cashmere of Afghanistan. So if you add value to these materials and to these processes and do create jobs, you enable people to have again a stake in society, to regain the possibility to have a dignified life and the life of collaboration, because work is about interrelating with other people. An artisan to work to produce a bag needs leather from another tanner, needs fittings from another artisan, needs stitching, and then you need somebody to give you the machine. You create a network. This is what we call social capital. Work is one of the best ways to create social capital. So we decided to create jobs in these places out of the value chain of fashion to increase social capital. Now, I don't know how this works. Let's see. We started in a place called Korokocho. Korokocho is a slum. Korokocho is a slum in Nairobi. Nairobi ni nyumbani. Nairobi's home, as we say in Swahili. In this place, we decided to work with artisans in order to learn how the most marginalized people of the world live and work. Because you have to understand how they work. And you see me, I'm very hairy, very ugly. So I'm particularly suitable to stay, live and work in these places. And this helped me a lot. In this place, we invented the system that is a value chain, a supply chain, based on people, in order to enable people to get a life out of that and to be part of society. And it's a supply chain that empowers workers, those who do the work, and their communities. And it's a supply chain which is traceable to involve consumers and brands into that, and which is based on very strong ethical standards. So we speak today about these three things: how to have a different supply chain, which is based on people, how to empower workers and communities, how to be traceable, how to have a different business model, which enables consumers to be part of that. What we do, we make accessories, we make bags, the most beautiful bags ever, in Kenya. We make some shoes in Ethiopia, and soon we'll move to Kenya. We make the most gorgeous handmade fabric with cotton and natural dyes in Burkina Faso and in Mali. We make garments in Afghanistan. We make beautiful things in silk, in raw silk in Afghanistan. We are setting up a spinning plant for cashmere in Afghanistan. We make jewelry, la bijouterie, très belle, very beautiful, in Haiti and in Mali and in Kenya. We make hats, beach hats, in Haiti, very nice, very beautiful. We make some of them in the Pacific, in the Vanuatu Islands. They're a bit less beautiful, but they are nice. And we are expanding to Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Cote d'Ivoire. We've always worked a bit in Uganda. These are some of the brands that work with us. These brands or this work is portrayed on the press every time, but it's always on the fashion press. And this frustrates me a bit because it doesn't speak about the reason why we do it, which is what I said before. So I'm very grateful to Jill who invited me. How to have a supply chain based on people. We all know the supply chain of the fashion industry is fragmented, disconnected, and opaque. And it's a matter of fact. And it's like this because the fashion industry, by doing this, gets all the margin in the downstream with the fashion brands. And if you are a producer in the disconnected and opaque side of it, you are squeezed like this. Wow! This is what they do to you. It gives you the idea, no? This opacity is everywhere. Think about Italy. Just during Fashion Week now in Milano, a reporter of the New York Times just reported that there are people working at home for €1 per day in Apulia, which is a region in southern Italy, and they work for big brands. So the big people of fashion here in Italy were all, oh, no, it's not to me. I don't do these things. Guys, no, I don't do it. But then they said, okay, I will control. But they all know that these things happen because when you squeeze, and you don't keep all the dots of the supply chain connected, you don't know what happens at the end of this. And there is room for exploitation. If it happens in Italy, which is a serious, I'm Italian, you may have understood this from my accent. And I am from Florence, which is the best part of Italy. All the rest of Italy is a rough copy of Florence. Let's go. Even here. If it happens in Italy, which is a country with a serious labor legislation, it can happen everywhere. So our supply chain is a supply chain based on long-term collaboration and based on joint investment. Long-term collaboration because if you want to have your suppliers to stay well and to work with you, you have to engage with them on the long-term perspective, at least 5 years. And you have to joint invest, to joint plan the investment in the people in the supply chain, in the structure of the supply chain, in yourself to be able to do it. The system that we created, where is it? It's like this. Does it point? Ta! Fashion brands, artisans, individual artisans here, you don't see them because you see them when they become cooperatives, groups, self-help groups. They become a business subject. Artisans who live in the middle of nowhere, very marginalized communities, 90% women. And then, wherever we work, in every country where we work, a central coordination unit, which is a social enterprise, a business entity, a commercial entity that develops the products with the international clients, acquires the orders, and then passes the orders here. Our role is to manage this, to give capacity building in here. From here, you have people, quality control, and technical assistance embedded in each of these groups, in each of these cooperatives, to make it work. But the key point is that these guys there, when they start working with us, they are bound to keep on investing with us in this supply chain, investing in capacity building. How? Giving us the possibility to test our products, giving us suggestions on how to improve our products, sending trainers, but not trainers in general. The UN, my employer is a great employer, but the UN, they do also a lot of training for the sake of training. And you send these very well-paid trainers, and they train people on they can go to the moon. But the main trainers come from here, because they know what they want. And I have to tell you, listen, this kind of bag, this kind of fabric, you have to do it like this. You have to work in this way. So we organize even our capacity building on the basis of this. And it's a joint investment. And guys, there are metrics to measure. There are performance indicators to measure this kind of supply chain. The first one is duration. It has to last. It has to be long-term. The second is traceability. It has to be traceable. And then we'll see this. It has to allow consumers and everybody to be visible in it. Because if somebody is not visible and traceable, there is something wrong. And the third one is power sharing. A supply chain is a power structure in which the one who buys has the power, and the other is a lame guy. I've always been in the position of the lame guy, in my life, always. So I'm very sympathetic with all the producers, because this is their position. In a supply chain like this, power means defining the prices all over the value chain together. So it's not the classic model that you give me, that you have to squeeze the producer to have the cost of goods sold as small as possible, and then all the margins are away. But you take some of these margins, you organize the company well, you know exactly where your margins are, where your investments are, and you devote some of that to the beginning of the supply chain, because you work in there, and you work in there for long term, so it's also in your interest in the long term. It's not in your immediate interest, but in the long term. The other point is that if you have power and you invest in these kind of things, you invest with the proper people, and you invest in product development which is meaningful. Product development is the way in which you start exploitation. Because you come, you ask me a product which is bloody difficult, which is designed according to only your own specification and needs. I am weak, I need to work, I need to try. And this is how I kill myself. Sooner or later, a producer, you kill yourself because you are not always in condition to say no. And then you beg, and then you have to offer a discount. This is the reality. Product development is where you start and where you sit together and you define how things go. So this is about power. I'll give you the example of cotton. We have collaboration on how to spin cotton, on how to dye it, on how to weave, on how to do the quality control. We have a buyer who helped us to do quality control, and he told me, I have a formidable lady who could do this for you, but she's 80. She doesn't want to travel anymore. She's Italian. She has an incredible skill for this manual quality control. I will pay for her. I will do everything, but you have to convince her. So I went to see her priest in her parish. She's Italian. They told the priest, when she comes on Sunday for the Mass, you have to tell her, this is the kind of collaboration. We got the person there paid by them. Now, workers' empowerment and community, you must have a compliance scheme in your mind. And the compliance scheme is the classic compliance scheme of the ILO. All the labor standards are the same. We don't reinvent the wheel. We were speaking about this yesterday with Jill. But we added something, the point 10, respect for community values. Whatever agenda you bring in a community, especially in the global south, in the low-income countries, you have to agree this with the communities. Because things may have a different meaning for me and for them. We take everything for granted. There are things that you don't negotiate, the basic human rights, you don't negotiate about them. But there are things to adapt, standards and way of doing things that you have to negotiate with communities. And it's a way to empower communities because you give voice to them and you teach them that they have a voice and they can express this voice. The second point is to have a clear idea of fair labor and what we said before, and living wage compliance, impact assessment, then the environment, and traceability and transparency. Fair labor and living wage. Fair labor are the criteria we have said. No forced labor, freedom of negotiation, equal pay, blah, 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 blah. We all know them, I don't go through them. But I want to speak about living wage. Living wage is difficult because living wage changes every place. You work in Kenya, in Korokocho, which is in Nairobi. The living wage is different from Kibera, which is always in Nairobi, if you are honest. But how to calculate it? You cannot. You are a company, you have supply chain. We are the UN, we have to do it. We have social workers, we have all this kind of stuff. What do? You use the NGOs and the UN and the cooperation. They are everywhere in the world. They do this work. It's their mandate. You do a partnership for them, and you get them to define with you what is a living wage. Then you do a wage ladder there. You do an wage ladder because living wage is a progress. It's not something that today you start completely changing your cost and you pay. Living wage is a function of the productivity of labor. You have to enable people to reach the living wage. That's why, what I said before, the capacity building, the training, the joint capacity building on people in the supply chain. This way you enable people to raise their productivity up to the level in which they can be paid the living wage. You achieve it together. So you start by here. Usually you are in here when you are lucky. Minimum wage according to sometimes it goes well, worker salaries here, living wage is always higher. You need this pushing capacity building. No capacity building, no long-term engagement in the supply chain, no living wage. There is no way to do it. You have to engage with your suppliers. Other point is the impact assessment, social impact assessment. We have a structured system and social workers. We do an impact assessment. We do the baseline when we start to work in a place to see how people live, what are the most common diseases, how many kids go to school, what is the housing, what is the sanitation, what is the income, what is the calories intake, And then every order that you place there, you do another assessment. What did it change? And then every year, you do a global one. So year after year, you see if your intervention works. We have places where by doing this, we discover incredible change simply by giving work to people. We discovered disease that disappeared. But things that are like the magic wand, and it's just work. There are places where we failed. And you discover it by this. And when you fail, you go back and you understand why you failed and you correct yourself. This is the testing. If you want a supply chain based on people, if you don't have social impact assessment, you don't know what's the result of your work. And we'll speak about this for companies. I don't speak about the environment because you already spoke about that, and I'm going to bore you. I'll speak about traceability and transparency. Earth Systems, this is the one we use. You put all the things, all the single components of a bag on a map with the artisans. You click on it, you go to see the story of the artisans, you go to see how much they are paid, you go to see the full traceability of it. This is still difficult because we need a single system to put together data in an objective way. We were saying yesterday, we all need it. We have the staff, because we have all of the social workers wherever we work, so we know exactly what happens with people wherever we are. But we need a system, blockchain-based system, this is partially based on it, that verifies data automatically and allows you to put them online without having a cumbersome system, which is good for us because we are the UN and we can pay for it, but it's not practical for companies. So action points. And then the last point, we spoke workers, community. I want to tell you another thing about workers and community. The only way for people to have a stake in their country and to hold their government accountable is to have a stake in the economy of their country. So by giving work to people and dignified work, you create citizens. And these citizens will hold their governments accountable. And these governments will hold the industry accountable. Because it's true that the fashion industry, there are already the consumers and they hold you accountable. But a good government intervention can do things that nobody can do. Thomas Jefferson, one of the architects of the Declaration of Human Rights, great man, great mind, the American Declaration, a great man I admire deeply. He had 65 slaves in his farm in Monticello. Why? Because that was the business model of the time. And it was very fine for the consumers of the time, because consumers were the white ones. But a movement outside the industry in which he was came, and the government implemented legislation, then there was also a war, and this disappeared. And this disappeared. Traceability and transparency. Traceability and transparency, we said about this, but it's also the involvement of consumers. It's also fashion as a service. This is a project that we have for consumers to develop. This is something for a hotel in the Caribbean, made in Burkina, but consumers to develop their own things through a curation offered by a design online platform that works with artisans. It's a service, involvement of consumers not only as tracing, but also as being active part of this by offering them a service, fashion as a service. And I don't know why I have this slide, but it's nice, and so you see it. I want to come to an end with action points. Traceability, the blockchain. The blockchain is a tool. We are all testing, we are all doing some experiments around this. Why don't we bundle our needs? We sit all together. We create a working group. We are speaking about this with Cara and Jill yesterday evening. We are able to finance it. We found a solution for this to be available, and then everybody puts his or her own stuff into that. Let's bundle our needs. Let's join forces. We are available to do it. There is Ingrid, our compliance officer, who is somewhere here. My eyes are very bad. She's Ingrid, where are you? Marema, where are you? There you are, at the end. Second point, the living wage. pay a living wage, but be sure of what you pay. In order to do it, invest in your supply chain. In order to do it, get NGOs, UN, your government cooperation. When you go into a country to produce, get them to help you on the living wage determination. It's their bloody duty. They've got to do it. They've got to do it for you. Third point, finance. We have a problem every time we create a new social enterprise. We have a problem of investors, because what we look for is impact investors. And impact investors also means blended finance, commercial finance, and some charity or development component. We need this kind of finance. We need to create new small business entities where we can test these new supply chains. Sometimes you cannot test this supply chain in your main company. It's too difficult. We did it with a Japanese company. They created a smaller company to test this with us, to work with us, and then to transfer this to the main one. And in that case, they had their own funding. But in other cases, we did something like this in Kenya, and we needed impact investment. We needed this kind of blended finance. We had a lot of troubles. There's an initiative like this in Latin America for artisans from Latin America, and it's a former investment banker from New York who has set up with other investors in there. And then a final point. There are bad practices. Don't follow them. Plain. Don't do it. But individually, not as a company. When you hear something and you think this is morally not right, call your bloody supervisor, the CEO, or if you are the CEO, the shareholders, and say, guys, this we cannot do it. It's whatever said. Whatever said. You said it. You said it. I don't want to. Can I summarize what you said? You said no bullshit. You didn't say like this because you're a fine person, but you said it in nicer words, but I translate in my ugly, the beast, you know. So don't do it. This is already a change if we all do it in this room. The rest will come. Transition in societies is always slow, but there arrives a moment in which it accelerates. I don't know where we are. I don't know if it will come sooner or later. I don't know if we are good or if we are bad. I don't know if we can be everywhere. What I know, that there is nothing more beautiful than engaging for a better world. Thank you.